अब हम मंत्र जाप करेंगे। ओम नमः शिवाय। शिव जी सदा सहाय। नमः शिवाय। गुरुजी सदा सहाय। नमः शिवाय। शिव जी सदा सहाय। नमः शिवाय। गुरुजी सदा सहाय।
Jai Guruji, Jai Sangat ji. Today I'm reading the satsang of Achal Paul, Director of Buzz Communications. A PR man gets his voice back. The winter of December 1999 brought chilling news for me. Slowly and steadily, my voice was fading away, and I had to make a real effort to speak even a few words. After I met ENT specialists, I felt that the Delhi winter, foggy and miserable as it is, was going to be a long one. The specialist recommended immediate surgery after detailed investigations. I went under the knife at Sir Gangaram Hospital in New Delhi. After surgery, the growth piece on my vocal cord was sent for a biopsy. The report confirmed my family's worst fears. The growth was malignant, that is, cancerous. Just 2 months after I suspected that my voice was deteriorating, I was facing hell and wondering what had led to it. After all, I do not smoke or drink alcohol, and neither do I chew tobacco or have pan, betel leaves. But God is quick to save. Within a week of my surgery, during my 3-week voice rest period, I was under Guruji's Sharan. Both my wife and I came to Guruji with our predicament. But we had to pass a test. 5 days after I had been operated on, I felt a compelling urge to go to Guruji. Doctors had warned me that water should not touch my throat at any cost, and that day it was raining hard when we started from home. My family advised me to rest and go some other day. However, I was determined to go to Guruji. My inner self told me that today is the day and I must. As we entered Empire State, the walk up to Guruji's Sthan was very soothing. Guruji, in his colorful robe, was sitting on his majestic gaddi seat, a symbol of spiritual authority. We were introduced and asked to sit on the rich red carpet that covered the hall. The sacred songs of Gurbani were being played over the audio system. The atmosphere was charged. After a while, chai prasad, tea prasad was served. Right after, Guruji called us up. He told my distraught wife, "Ja, tere husband nu 50% theek kar ditta. Your husband has been cured by half. Go get the tests done again." It was not easy to believe that a cancerous growth had been treated, but we followed Guruji's advice. We sourced the 4 remaining biopsy slides from Sir Gangaram Hospital and sent 2 slides each to AIIMS, New Delhi, and Tata Institute, Mumbai, for a retest. After about a week, we got the reports and came to Empire Estate. As soon as we entered, Guruji smiled and said, "Kyon, doctors confused ho gaye? The doctors are confused, aren't they?" Indeed, they were. Both reports declared me fit. The first miracle had come to pass. Thereafter, doctors advised me not to ignore the histopathology findings and get the full treatment done. I was determined that if at all I had to get any further treatment, it would only be on Guruji's directions. Fulfilling my wishes, that is what happened. Guruji blessed me and made me eat langar full of chilies, which was a strict no-no for the doctors, who had asked me to stick to boiled food. Guruji went a step further. He made me speak and pronounced that I was all right. I was continuing with radiotherapy on Guruji's advice, but I didn't feel any side effects at all. I had no nausea and my hemoglobin level throughout remained above normal. The only medicine, if I may call it so, was the water I drank from a copper tumbler blessed by Guruji. I was to fill the tumbler with water every night before going to sleep, and the next morning to drink half of it first thing and to put the rest in my bath bucket. That's it. By following this simple ritual, I was fully cured. Such has been my miraculous transition to a new fit life, and I have 2 daughters and my wife to share it with. Thanks to Guruji. Now I'm going to read the second satsang, which is by Dr. Anita. Like a mother, he holds us close to his bosom. So much has happened since my family and I had Guruji's first darshan. Before then, my life was in a mess. My father was in a coma and had been hospitalized for a month and a half. Being a doctor, I was well aware of all the complications that could arise and hence could not bring myself to leave his bedside. Then came a day when my frustration rose and I could take it no more. Everything seemed to be going wrong. Finances were at an all-time low, and every passing minute trying to keep my father alive was an ordeal. My sister and brothers were also trying their best. Nothing seemed to work. I was feeling dejected. Fighting back tears, I wondered why God didn't come to my family and rescue us. I had always believed in him, loved him, and trusted him with all my heart, so why wasn't he responding? I needed to meet someone with whom I could share all my sorrows without having to utter a word. Someone who would watch over me, someone who would give me strength to face reality and bail me out whenever I was in trouble. I needed him. One night I came home but could not sleep. Around 3 a.m., my brother Shiv rushed into the room and gave us some prasad. Shiv told us he had been to Guruji's and narrated some of the miracles he had heard over there. I slept well that night. Next day, my husband and I decided to go for Guruji's darshan. Little did we know that nobody could reach him till he so ordains. I had imagined that I would be meeting a long, bearded Babaji sitting under a tree, but I was taken by surprise. Here was a person who has such an intense aura, who had the innocence of a child when he smiled, whose eyes seemed to penetrate through your very being, touching you. I was overwhelmed after meeting him. His fragrance was intense, as if a lot of rose essence had been sprayed around. He made us sit right next to him and somehow made us feel secure. For some strange reason, I felt the tension drain out of me. He also assured me all would be well. The very next day, I took my twin boys, who were about 4 years old then, to seek Guruji's blessings. On the way, I asked them to do pranam to Guruji. My elder son Daksh politely declined, saying that he only touched Shivji's feet. As I walked up to Guruji to pay my respects, Daksh just stood there while Dhruv bowed. I felt very bad, as Daksh had not touched his feet till then. Suddenly I found that Daksh had walked back to Guruji and was touching his feet. Later, I teasingly asked the little fellow why he had done so. He innocently replied that he had touched Shivji's feet. Thus, unnoticed by everybody, Guruji had given his darshan to Daksh. Gradually, things started getting better, and help for my father's treatment came from all quarters with Guruji's blessings. My husband, too, found his dream job. Nothing will happen to your child. Then, in year 2000, Daksh developed loss of appetite accompanied by fever, weight loss, and enlarged lymph nodes. The doctor treated him with antibiotics, but nothing worked. It was a Monday when we took him to Sargangaram Hospital to get him examined by a senior specialist. I feared the worst. Daksh's symptoms were pointing towards a cancer process. I clutched at Guruji's picture while walking into the doctor's cabin. I was praying for my son's good health and repeatedly asking Guruji for his blessing. I knew that it was in his power to correct the ailment in a split second. The cabin filled with his fragrance. I had heard that if you remember Guruji truly, he always comes to your rescue. The rosy scent signified his presence. The doctor examined Daksh and was very upset and looked disappointingly at me. He had found both the spleen and the liver enlarged, clearly pointing towards malignancy. The doctor made me feel the enlarged organs and asked for an ultrasound of the abdomen immediately to assess the extent of the involvement. I was near to tears, fervently praying to Guruji to take care of this problem. I had heard of so many miracles and was convinced that he could cure my son. Throughout the 40-minute drive to the radiologist, Guruji's fragrance reached out to us reassuringly. While the ultrasound was being conducted, my son and I could feel his presence as his fragrance lingered around us. With Guruji's blessings, the ultrasound was normal. The entire diagnosis changed. Even the liver and spleen were found to be normal in size. Guruji had listened to our prayers and given a new lease of life to our child. In the evening, we reached Guruji's place, hoping to talk to him about the day's events. We were pleasantly surprised as we entered the hall, for he called out with a mischievous smile on his lips, "So, what was the diagnosis?" I was overwhelmed. He already knew what had happened during the day and yet had given us an opportunity to satisfy our curiosity. I told him that the doctors were suspecting cancer. He kept quiet. I was near to tears when he said, "Don't worry, nothing will happen to your child." I inquired if I needed to conduct the various tests that were due. He answered that as I was a doctor, I would not understand and I could go ahead as I wished to. Somewhere my logical mind would not let things rest with him, and so I got a gamut of investigations conducted on my son. Believe it or not, each one came out normal. Finally, a biopsy was conducted on the lymph node, which by now had started joining or matting. The lymph node that was removed showed changes to the naked eye. I was confused. How could this be? Guruji had said that all would be fine, but then why this? All kinds of thoughts came to my mind. I was desperate. That evening, I was asked to come to his Sangat once a week only. I wondered why he had done this. Next week, the biopsy results came and they were normal. The surgeon could not believe it. He said it was a miracle. We, of course, knew who had performed it. Guruji had blessed my son, so this had to be. A few weeks later, Guruji one day just said, "Ja, tere munde nu theek kar ditta. I have cured you, son." From that day, the fever disappeared, my son's appetite improved, the lymph node was reduced, and the matting disappeared. Thanks to Guruji, Daksh became all right. No medication whatsoever was given to him, as no conclusive diagnosis about his condition could ever be made. With Guruji, every moment is a miracle and worth living for. He holds your hand and guides you gently. He carries your burden on himself without letting you know. He clears the path ahead and makes it soft and pleasant. He shields you from all evil, all wrong, and holds you close to his bosom like a mother would to protect her child. And when you go wrong, he gently prods you back to the right path. He listens to you every breath that you take and gives you the faith to believe in the goodness of God, and that is him. Unassumingly, he watches over you and all other lives that even fleetingly touch you, blessing each one all the way. He has no heirs, no ego. He makes no demands. He's forever giving. He's unfathomable. Amongst the thousands that throng for his darshan, not a single one goes unblessed. Each one of us feels that he is with him only. He shows the correct way of conducting one's duties in this world. He suffers silently when we go astray, and also when he takes the burden of our pain on himself. Believe me, there is no one like him, never has been, and never ever will be. My mother was hospitalized some years ago, and the doctors felt that her hemoglobin was very low and she would need a transfusion. We rushed to Guruji and shared our worries with him. He smiled and blessed her. The very next day, she was back home with all her tests normal. The healer in white clothes. My maternal aunt, Mausi, who has never been to Guruji, one day slipped into a deep coma and was admitted to the ICU. The doctors suspected brain hemorrhage as she had very high blood pressure. Guruji was not in Delhi at that time, and I prayed before Guruji's photograph for his blessings and cure while her CT scan was taking place. Guruji's fragrance filled the CT scan room, and the CT scan report came normal. I left my Mausi still in a deep coma at night. But I was pleasantly surprised to see her sitting on her bed the next morning, very much conscious. She told me that the night before, a very fair person in white clothes had woken her up and had asked her to get up. I immediately knew that Guruji had blessed her. She is absolutely normal today, and we still do not know why she has slipped into a coma, as all her tests were normal. Guruji returned from Jalandhar about 3 months later, and as soon as I bent down to touch his feet, he remarked, "Mausi ko bhi theek kara liya. You got your Mausi cured by me as well." I was surprised. He was not even here, and nobody knew about my Mausi's illness, but then he knows everything. I should have realized this. It is amazing how Guruji keeps an eye on you wherever you go, whether in this country or abroad. Time and distance do not exist. He is beyond time and beyond the realms of space. Some years ago, I took ill and was admitted to a hospital with fever, backache, and breathlessness. I was put on injectables, inhalers, and oxygen, but I continued to suffer. It was a Friday when the consultant decided to do a CT scan of my chest. The radiologist saw the scan. He remarked that it was not a normal scan, and whatever it was had spread to most of my lungs. I would need further evaluation. I was alone in the hospital that day, and the only person I could turn to and knew who would look after me was Guruji. I prayed to him the whole day. In the evening, I went to Guruji, and out of the blue, he turned to me and asked me how I was. I told him I was admitted to a hospital and had difficulty in breathing, and that every night since Monday, I had been so sick that the ICU doctors had been called out. I also told him that the CT scan of my lungs was bad and prayed that he cure me. He smiled benevolently and said that he had cured me and I was fine. I couldn't hold back my tears. In a fraction of a second, he had removed all my problems. That night, I felt so relieved that I slept without any medication. I had not slept for the last 4 or 5 nights. The doctors came to check and found me sleeping without any oxygen support. They went back surprised. How in this world would they know that the highest power in the world was at work? The next morning, I requested a discharge and came home. I am feeling fine since that day 3 years ago and have not undergone any tests. Some time ago, my husband, also a doctor, had been experiencing some early morning discomfort for almost a week. An ECG detected changes and we thought of admitting him, but my husband refused and came back home. He said he would rather go to Guruji and take his permission for getting admitted. I took him to another cardiologist early next morning, and even he suggested further evaluation at the earliest, as changes in the ECG were clear and substantial. We panicked and decided to go see Guruji right away, knowing very well that it would not be possible to meet him at this hour. We were amazed to find ourselves in front of him. He looked at us and said, "So you have come to get Arun cured?" I was overwhelmed and told him all that had happened. With a wave of his hand and a reassuring look, he said that it was nothing and that Arun would be fine. He asked Arun to go back to the office and resume work instead of going to the hospital. Guruji also prescribed 2 pegs of whiskey and a wheatgrass extract daily. A few weeks later, Guruji told Arun that he had cured his heart, else doctors would have had to operate upon it. With Guruji's blessings, Arun is fine today. We are so thankful to Guruji for blessing us and giving us this happy family. We pray that he watches over us forever. His blessings extended to my sister as well. She fell sick and the pathologist indicated a diagnosis of some kind of lymphoma. But Guruji blessed her and said she had nothing and she would be fine. The next morning, there was a call from the lab. They said there was some confusion regarding the samples. My sister was fine. But it was not just my family that was blessed. My neighbor, Mr. Sethi, was diagnosed with acute pancreatitis and had been admitted to the ICU. The doctors had very little hope of his recovery. Guruji blessed him, and today the man is back at work. In a matter of days, Mr. Sethi's critical condition turned normal thanks to Guruji. The doctors say that Sethi is very lucky, but we know that he is very blessed. Once Guruji visited a hospital ICU where a young man, Man Singh, was suffering from brain fever, cerebral malaria. He was on the respirator and undergoing dialysis as well. The doctors had lost hope of his recovery. Man Singh's brother came to Guruji with his photograph, and Guruji recognized him, though nobody had told Guruji anything about Man Singh. Guruji blessed Man Singh. Within the next 2 weeks, he was discharged and is now healthy and back at home. The family, which have got back a member of their own from a dangerous disease, keep thanking Guruji ceaselessly. With you since beyond time. My twin sons would constantly squabble about who was the elder. One day Guruji cleared their doubts by pointing out that one was elder to the other by 6 minutes. I was amazed to hear this, as due to a complication during their birth, the doctors could not note down the time of birth of the second twin. I wondered how he knew this. He suddenly turned and answered that he was the one who had blessed me with these sons, and so he knew. And that was before I had gone to him, before I knew him as Guruji, before I had felt his presence in my life. Obviously, he had known me since way beyond and had been keeping timeless watch. Unsurprisingly then, every single day at Guruji's is filled with miracles. I thank Guruji for being there for us now and always. Jai Guruji, Jai Sangat Ji.